Good evening, everyone, and you're almost welcome to tonight's Lifeline. I hope you had a wonderful day, a very good day. We're going to set the ball so that we can actually have enough time to deal with the business of the day. Right, so this is Lifeline, and it's a program where we come together and listen to an inspiring story that relates to any aspect of life, career, marriage, finance, whatever, and so that we can learn from it. And tonight is just going to be that. And just to do some housekeeping. So we expect to be here for about an hour, 45 minutes. And depending on, how far we can get by that time. And then we would actually want everyone's mics to be muted until the question and answer session, when you can put your microphones on so that we can ask you questions. You will also need to ask questions at question time, either by using the hand raising icon, or you can put your question in the chat box. So I hope that is straightforward enough for all of us to have a very rewarding time together. Right, so going forward, I just have a quote here from someone, and she said, when it comes to taking ownership for developing your career, learning from others is vitally important. Learning from others is vitally important. And on Lifeline tonight, we have someone I believe that you can learn from. And permit me to introduce him as a long-lost friend, because we were at uni together many years ago. At some point, we were in the same fellowship, and we all went our different ways after uni. And just lately, I was looking at Wale Adenuga's page, and he advertised his book, Shala's book. I said, I know this guy. This is Josh. I said, okay. So I began chasing him up and down there, because the book that Wale was advertising, which he wrote, is, it's just germane to what we're doing here tonight. So I believe that indeed we have someone to learn from as that goes. So Shola is a business executive who has been in the IT tech industry for over 2 decades, and in that aspect, he has actually been in the HR part of the organizations. Helping them to develop and to grow their businesses. And aside from that, he's a mentor, and he's also on the boards of different organizations, particularly in the tech industry. He's a seasoned advisor, and he's quite passionate about empowering people, and not just people, nations. The other day, he sent me the video of some of his conferences back home, in Nigeria. And I remember when I saw that, I remember Dr. Moro, he had a similar passion of developing third world nations in the area of leadership, which Shola is also involved with. He's got the Josh Leadership Academy. And interestingly, Josh has been something that he had been, uh, carrying for many years. I mean, back then in university, we knew him as Josh, and then he had this publication newsletter or something I used to bless believers with. So he is an author and has published a very, very good book. And the book is titled Managing Up for Career Progression. Managing Up for Career Progression. I believe we're going to be learning from that that journey tonight also. So permit me to welcome, and a big welcome that is to dear friend Shola Oshineke. Welcome to Lifeline. Thank you for accepting our invitation, and we all have been looking forward to this. So over to you then.
Thank you so much, and good evening. So thank you, Pastor Ade and Pastor Ayo. I don't know whether she's on the line, but yeah, we go back a long way, so thank God for that. Yeah, happy to be here. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, you have to enable me to share my screen.
Recording in progress.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I can. I actually can.
Okay. 1 second.
Just a minute. I'm trying to do something.
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see the screen.
Okay. Just give me a second. Let me move it to presentation mode.
Please, can we all put our mics on mute until the question and answer session?
All right. So thank you for having me, Kingdom Life Tabernacle York. Excited to be here, and we have about 40 minutes for me to kind of go through some content with you, and then, like Pastor said, we'll then move to a Q&A session. I do know that sometimes when you're listening to me, you might have a question and you don't want to forget it, and maybe you might want to type it into the chat so that we don't lose your question. But it's we'll try and make it interactive once I go through my content. I do have a lot of content to go through, so I will try and make that snappy and try and be on time so that we have enough time for dialogue and questions later. So quick introduction. I mean, Pastor's already introduced me, but I think I just wanted to add a little bit more. So on the slide you're seeing now, that's my family. So I have 2 daughters who are biological, and then 1 daughter through marriage, and that's my son. So my son is married to Funshaw, and we all actually now live in the Bath, Bristol area. We attend Life Church. I lead a couple of organizations. One of them is called Josh Leadership, and the other one is Josh Leadership Academy. And just for the record, for those who might not know, Josh actually stands for Jesus Our Savior, Hallelujah. And yes, it's been around for a very long time. And at the bottom of the screen, you see a couple of books that I have been involved with. And the one in number 5 is the one that I co-authored with Pastor Wale. One lesson learned, when we interviewed about 26 people and found out what's the one lesson they learned from their career. So anyway, that's just a quick introduction. There's a map of the world because I love traveling. And I do have a ministry also, which is Josh Publications, which originally was Josh Writing Ministry. So just to give you context to know who I am. So what I'm going to do now is take you on a journey of my career. And then we're going to go into some content and some tools, and then we'll go into Q&A. So this slide is busy, but intentionally busy, because I try to take you on the journey and tell you a couple of stories. So as you can see, and I'll kind of keep you guided as we go through it. So point number one is that I studied civil engineering from University of Ife, now Obafemi Awolowo University. When I graduated, I wanted to work as a magazine editor. So I did a small stint and then I went for my National Youth Service. And when I finished my youth service, my fiance, who is now my wife, she moved to the UK. So we were the first group of the jackpots of those days. So in 1993, I moved to the UK. But when I got to the UK, after applying for about 103 jobs, nobody wanted to hire me as a civil engineer. So I decided to do whatever my hand found to do, which was I started to work as a security guard, earning about £2.50 an hour, guiding mainly buildings and offices. And actually, what's very interesting is that I was working as a security guard, but I only had the concept of a guard from Nigeria. I didn't understand what that in the UK, security guard was actually a profession. And that's where I met Amanda. So Amanda was my boss, but she also became my first job mentor. She was the first person that actually helped me to know how to do my job as a security guard. And she literally coached me and taught me and made me a good security guard. And one day, anyway, so something happened at work, and then I realized that I couldn't stay in the company anymore and I needed to move on. And she, as my coach, mentor, said to me that I should apply for other jobs where I can get paid more because I'm a graduate, I speak good English. And so I went to work for a company called Securico. And while I was working for them, you kind of get opportunities to get promoted. And I think one thing I want to say here as part of the journey and the story is that sometimes whatever your hand finds to do, you need to do it as unto the Lord. Because what I made up my mind was like, if this is what God has allowed me to do for right now, to be a security guard, I wanted to be the best security guard possible. I wanted to do my job really well, understand it, follow protocol, follow policy, which became very important for the next stage of my journey. And so at point number 6, one day I was doing an 18-hour shift in Manchester, because I used to live in Manchester at that time. And I looked up and there was a notice board and it says positive action for African and Caribbean graduates. And basically the University of Manchester was trying to get, people of color into the university. So they had this positive action for them to go into the community and hire people. And I thought to myself, I'm a graduate, I'm African, so I applied. And when I was writing out the application form, it got to the box called Other. And I said to myself, how can I make my application stand out? And I thought and thought and thought, and this word just came to me. I will give you 101% commitment. So I just put it, that's all I wrote. I'll give you 101% commitment. And that statement was so impactful that the Deputy Director of Estates and Services, John Wilson, decided that he was the one that's going to interview me, even though he wasn't going to be my direct boss, but he chose that because this guy wrote this one, I want to understand what this 101% commitment is all about. So he came to interview me. And while he was interviewing me, I think we were like 5 minutes into the interview, and he said, what have you been doing for the last 18 months of your life? I said, I've been working in security. He said, okay, that's interesting. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to change the interview right now, and we're just going to focus on security. That's not the job you've applied for, but I want to change it because I think if that's what you've been doing for the last 18 months, let's focus on that. So if you were a security guard here, or if you were heading up security here, how would you secure this university? And actually, for the next 1 hour, that's all he wanted to talk about. How I would secure it. What did I learn from being a good security guard? Well, what did I learn from being a security guard? And I think I'm saying this, telling you this story because I did do it. I didn't just say it was something that I'm doing bypassing. Because I learned it, I was able to spend at least 50 minutes talking to him, giving him ideas. At the end of the interview, he said to me as he was walking out the door, he said, you told me about 5 things that you would do as the head of security for the university. 3 of them I'm going to implement on Monday. And I want to tell you that you've got the job. And that's how I got the job. And so I went in. It was supposed to be a 1-year job. It was like a 1-year contract. And at the end of my contract, my boss came to me, not the same guy that interviewed me, but my other boss. He said to me, we really like you. but we don't have a job for you. Why don't you create a job for yourself? Call it whatever you want to, and then we'll have to advertise it, and hopefully you would get it. And so I sat down, created a job called technical clerk. There was no job description for anything. I built the job description on the basis of the work I was doing, and I also put in the work I wanted to do and the work that so I kind of created my job for myself, my dream job. So I put the job out there. Well, I didn't, my boss did. 24 people applied for the job, and by the grace of God, I got the job. And I tell you that story because it doesn't happen often that you're given like a blueprint to kind of design your own job. And I think by designing my own job, I put into it the things I wanted to do. And part of that was to work with computers, because at that time, I hadn't really worked with computers, and I was self-taught at home. And I gave myself the opportunity that within 2 years, I was ready to move on. So after 2 years of working as the technical clerk, the job I created, and I'll just finish on this point. At my leaving party, the deputy director, John Wilson, he came to my leaving party. There was about 40 people there, and he brought with him my application that I had applied 3 years ago. He brought it. He brought it to the leaving do, and then he asked the room, and he said, "Guys and girls, have this man not given us 101% commitment?" And so I think sometimes when you do put something special on your CV, or you put something special in your application, you need to follow through so that at the end of it all, people do recognize that you did what you said you were going to do. And so anyway, the key point is that from that point 7, I taught myself enough programming to be confident enough to go out and apply for a job. And I was being interviewed for a job with the College of Law. So I'm now at point number 8, if you're following me on the slide. So at the College of Law, when I went for the interview, I aced the first part. The first part was like Nick Galt, who was my boss's boss. He said to me, "You've got this job. But there's a tiny little detail we have to do. You have to do a technical interview, but we think you're going to be fine." And so I've done the first part of the interview. We've even talked about salary. They've talked about relocating me down from Manchester to Guildford. Everything was fine, but you have to now go and do the technical test. So I go into the technical room. Remember, I taught myself programming. So I didn't know all the technical knowledge. I just knew how to find ways around it. So I get into the test, and there's 10 questions. And I look at the questions, and I can tell you, honestly, I couldn't answer one, not one. I just didn't understand what the question was. And so my boss came in, Chris, who later became a good mentor of mine. He came in and he said, "Shola, are you struggling? Like, how is the test going?" I said, "Look, it's not going well. Like, I don't even understand the question." And so he went to the whiteboard, and he basically spent about 20 minutes explaining the questions to me, linking how I had learned programming to what the question was asking. And by doing that, I got 6 out of 10. The pass mark was 5.5. And so I passed and I got the job. A week before I started the job, Chris called me, said, "Can you travel down from Manchester? I want to have a chat with you." So I traveled all the way down. There was no mobile phones in those days, or at least not properly. And so when I got down, he said, "I want to take you for a walk." So he took me for a walk, and he said, "Shola, we gave you the job. You and I know that you didn't really pass the test. But when you left, we saw 3 other people, and the lowest they got was 8 out of 10 without my help. So I just want to check, I hope I haven't made a mistake by offering you this job." I said, "Don't worry, you haven't made a mistake. I'm going to do my very best." And I can tell you truthfully that I was the worst, at least technically, on the technical level, I was the worst programmer they had ever hired. And so by the time I came into the job, I was the most, even though I was brought in as almost a senior programmer, I was the least experienced. There were people there that had been programming for 15 years, 10 years. But you know what? God was so good, because my family was still living in Manchester and I was down in Guildford. And so what I did was I did my 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, whatever it was, get home, have dinner, and then from 7 o'clock till midnight, every single day for 6 months, I taught myself, I coded, I taught myself. And then the story turned. So within like 9 months of being there, I was asked to deliver a project. And when I was delivering the project, it was the first project that went live with no bugs. There were no issues with the project. And that began to give me a reputation. And the reason why there were no issues with it, because back then, I wasn't a programmer. I wasn't like a core programmer. And so I was always looking for shortcuts. And while I was looking for the shortcuts, I came across this concept of graphical user interface. Now, everybody does that today, but back then, it was new. And so I used that to capture the requirements of the customer and then delivered a solution to them. And then I found my niche. My niche was I could listen to a business person, convert that into technical terms and get the programmers to program the system, or I could do it myself. And that's how I was able to deliver solutions for them. It got to a stage that the business was now asking for me to go and learn different programming languages so I could deliver projects for them. And the good news is that 2 years into me working there, I was getting bored because I was now one of their best programmers. And I took Chris, my boss, I took him for a walk. And I said to him, I said, look, I'm bored. I want to change. And he said, oh, there's not much we can do for you here in terms of progression right now, but we'll do our best. I said, look, I'm just informing you that I'm looking. And so I did go out and I got a job with GlaxoSmithKline. And actually, one lesson I learned, and I say this to people, that when you ever want to leave a company, you need to make up your mind whether you're leaving or you're just using this new job to get a pay rise. And so I always make the decision that I would always, if I'm leaving, then I'm leaving. Even if you give me the same money, you know, your opportunity has gone. So his boss, Nick, the guy who interviewed me, he was so happy. He wasn't happy that I was leaving. So he invited me for a discussion. And he basically said, how much are they paying you where you're going? Which was about 10 grand more than they were paying me. He said, we'll do that. I'll match it. And I said, no, Nick, look, it's been great working for you guys. You guys have been great, but it's time for me to move on. And so I go into work for GlaxoSmithKline. And again, I'll be dropping stories in just to kind of help. I don't know whether there's somebody specifically that this is helpful for, but I do believe that God is kind of leading me to share some particular stories, because I mean, we don't have time for me to share every story, right? But when I got to GSK, I do remember my second day. I went up to my boss because I'd learned something from the College of Law that you should always know when you join a company, know where you are brought in. Like in the pay scales, where are you brought in? Are you at the bottom? Are you in the middle? Are you at the top? And what's the room for growth that you have? So I discovered that I was brought in at the very top of my pay scale. So it was like going to be very difficult for them to promote me. So I went to talk to my boss's boss, Dominic, and I said, hey, Dominic, you know, day 2, really enjoying it. Just wanted to know, like, how long does it take for people to get promoted here? And he looked at me with a funny look and he said, 5 years. You know, you got to work at your job for 5 years before you get promoted. And as I walked away from him, I was like, no way. I'm not waiting 5 years to get promoted to the next level. No, I've got to find a way to fix this. So I use a method that I continue to use till tomorrow, which is I began to study the organization's job structures, how people get promoted, what do you need to do to get to the next level. And actually over the next, so I worked for GSK for 7 years, and over the next, like from that moment until I left, I had 5 promotions. 5 promotions, 4 different jobs, you know, many different things happened. And so anyway, long and short is I decided that at some point, having worked on a big program with GSK, now in project management, I decided that, well, the team that I was working with said to me, Shola, you know, you'll make a great consultant. I had never thought about being a consultant, but sometimes you just have to listen to your peers. They observe you, they study you, they know what you're doing. So they said to me, you should go and become a consultant. So I applied to Accenture. Accenture rejected me on my first application. But then because my application was in the system, when a job came up that was like what I was doing at GSK, they then called me, basically headhunted me and said, you applied for this job, but we didn't give it to you, but here's a job that we think is perfect for you. And so that's how I got into Accenture. Had great opportunities, learned a load of stuff, and then I got headhunted by PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I crossed over from Accenture into PwC. And when I got to PwC, again, it was a great opportunity for me to learn, to grow. But again, I was hungry. I wanted to kind of move quickly. And I got lucky, if you like, in that they gave me a good mentor. And my mentor and I worked really well. And then they threw me on a project that basically catapulted my career. I went to work in Scotland for Royal Bank of Scotland, and I did a good job, saved the company. Well, I made the company about £1 million. And because of that, they were like, oh, we would like you to get promoted. So I worked with them. I became a senior manager. And then during my transition from senior manager to director, they gave me a mentor called Barry. And sometimes, I'm a big believer that mentors have the power to shift you. And that's what Barry did, because even though I was a good senior manager, I wasn't ready for directorship. But Barry prepared me, coached me, and then I got into becoming a director. After becoming a director, after 2 years, my boss and I fell out. It was a racial thing, but I felt like it was like, your time here is up. And so I left, and I went to work for a company called Deliveroo, which many of you might know, a food delivery company. And how did I get that job? I got that job because one of my clients at HSBC had moved to Deliveroo to be the head of people at Deliveroo. And she called me up and said, Shola, you know how you helped us solve the problem in HSBC? So I always say this, your network is your net worth. And so she basically called me up and said, I've got a job for you. Would you come and work for me? So I did, went to work for Deliveroo, worked there for about 2 years. And one day, Easter time, I got a call from a company called Naspers Process. They were headhunting somebody to come and head up their people operations for about 83 companies in 103 countries. And so I got the job as a senior director. I was there for 3 years, and I got promoted to be a vice president of that. And then last year, I got made redundant. That's a story for another day. And then after I got made redundant, took some time off, went traveling, decided that I now don't want to do that, and I don't want to work for anybody anymore. I want to now be an independent consultant. And so I started Josh Leadership. Even though I had Josh Leadership Academy anyway, doing mentoring and coaching, I started Josh Leadership, and that's what I do now. I do some consulting. So I wanted to give you all of that story. That's my story. But now let's kind of just dive in a little bit more into some context and some content, and then hopefully we'll get to Q&A. So when you're thinking of your career ladder, one of the key tools you're going to need is the ability to know yourself, know oneself. Who are you? Who are you becoming? No, because if I just stuck and said I'm a civil engineer, that's all I want to do, then I wouldn't have pivoted to where I am today, right? And so the ability to know who you are and what you're capable of, and of course we underlay that with the fact that we're children of God. So I would say, see a man diligent in his way, he will stand before kings and not mere men. So if we were in a workshop session, I would have said, who are you? And maybe just gone around the room and let people define themselves. But I think it's very important for you to, do this exercise. Ask yourself, what is your vision or mission statement for yourself, for your career? I'm not talking about your church ministry. I'm not talking about what God has called you to do in church. I'm talking about what has God called you to do in the marketplace. Do you understand your mission or your vision? And it's okay if you don't, but you should take time to think about it. What is your mission and your vision? What makes you tick? What are you about? Secondly, you need to know what motivates you. Some people are motivated by, money. Some people are motivated by position. Some people are motivated by encouragement. Some people are motivated by challenge. What you need to understand yourself well enough to lead yourself, because if you don't understand yourself, you can't lead yourself. What things motivate you? What's the one thing, if I wake you up in the middle of the night and say, hey, would you like to do this? And you'll be like, yes. Then number 3, what rewards do you expect? And when I say rewards, I'm talking broadly. Like, you want respect back, you want money. Like, we all want money, but actually money, when it comes to career in the marketplace, money is very different. Some people just want a salary. And that's why a lot of people in the UK tend to do contracting, because they don't realize that actually you can make a lot more money, like a lot more money, crazy money, by staying in a corporate. But it's just because it's the mindset. You want money now, or you're happy to build your career so you can get money tomorrow. So it's really about, where do you want that money? What do you need for right now? I'll talk about it in a second, about the difference between your passion and what feeds you. You know, sometimes you just need money. Like working as a security guard, that was not my job. Like, that's not what I studied. That's not what it was feeding me. It was getting my bills paid. And it gave me enough to kind of be the stepping stone for what I was going to do later. So then what's your purpose? Because your purpose links to your mission. And then what defines you? Like if I ask your ex-colleagues or your current colleagues or your boss or your spouse or your parents, how would they define you? Are you hardworking? Are you exploratory? Are you a stickler for detail? Or like, understanding yourself is probably the most powerful thing you can ever do. Then understand your why. Why do you do what you do? Number 6. What rights do you have in Christ? Like, a lot of us, we are Christians, we are believers, but we don't take God to work because we don't want to get into trouble. But actually, you don't have to plaster on your head, I'm a born-again Christian. It's just how do you bring God to work? I always like to tell a story. So one of the stories, when I was working for GSK as a programmer, one day it was our Bible study day, our prayer meeting day, at work, and I had this problem that everybody was dealing with it. Nobody could solve it. It was the US, the Philippines, and myself. There was people who were even more senior than me. We were trying to solve this problem and we couldn't solve it, and we needed to go live with the product. And I said to myself, do I take 30 minutes out and go and do the prayer meeting, or do I just stay here because we've been working on this all night? Do I just stay here and continue to work on this? And I felt like, look, 30 minutes going to pray would calm my nerves, and So I went to the prayer meeting, and when I finished the prayer meeting, as I was walking out, I heard in my spirit line 103. And I went back to my desk, I opened the code in Notepad, and I saw it, line 103. That was the error. The problem I've been trying to solve for 3 days, God just took me straight to where the error was, solved it. So when I say, what rights do you have in Christ? Do you expect God to show up, give you prophetic understanding, help you to do your work?
Most important thing, no.
What do you expect when you're in the marketplace? Then the next thing is, what are your strengths, your weaknesses? What opportunities do you see? What threats do you envisage? And then finally, do you have a healthy approach to life? Like, do you have a balanced life? Like, do you know how to, divide your day into ministry, your personal devotion, your work, your family, your study time? Like, how do you grow yourself? These are things that you need to know about yourself to kind of lead yourself. And if you can't lead yourself, it's very hard for you to actually go up a career ladder. Okay, so like I said, there's always this tension, particularly depending on where you are in your career. Most of this tension appears when you're really beginning your career, but even when you're in the middle of it, sometimes this can come up. What is your passion and what feeds you? And finding the balance between those two things, what do you need to spend time on? Like, if you want to become, like when I was in consulting, I wanted to become a partner. If you know anything about consulting, you start as a manager and the end game is partnership. And to do that, you need to really be disciplined about your journey. And there's some professions that are like that. If you want to be a doctor, if you want to be a consultant, if you study medicine, you want to be a consultant, there's some things you have to do. There's some things you have to endure to get to that point. You can't just overnight get there. And so understanding what your passion is and what feeds you is always a very key thing in this whole process of understanding yourself. Bible says this: you see a man who is excellent in his work, he will stand before kings, he would not stand before unknown men. And the whole idea is that we have an edge as believers if we can just allow God to be our guide. Expand your mind, right? Really, I want to encourage you. As you're leading yourself, expand your mind, and you will be amazed at how much you can actually do. Like, if somebody told me when I was in Ife that I could end up being a programmer, that I could end up running programs, working in Philadelphia, I've probably traveled to about 20 countries to work in my 30 or so years of working. I wouldn't have known that. But environment, opportunities, mentorship, coaching helps you to expand your mind. Even evenings like this, it helps us to expand our mind as to what are the possibilities. So another tool that helps you when you are thinking about moving up the career ladder is your ability to think. There's a great book by Adam Grant called Think Again. And when I say think, I mean really think. Think about why you do what you do. Think about, the different things that happen in your career. Think about why your company is going in a particular direction. I always say to people that if you're working for a company that you don't love, find another job. Because if you want to grow up, if you want to go up the ladder, if you want to, go up the career ladder, you need to understand the company you're working for. You need to think about the company you're working for. And I would say if you're here and you work for a company, and you're not like you're running your own company or even if you work for a school, you need to read the annual report of your school, understand the psyche of your school. Because if you don't, there's no way, it becomes harder. Don't let me say there's no way. It becomes harder for you to grow through the organization. So another tool that you need to have is the ability to set smart and clear goals. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard of SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Set goals. Even if your company doesn't set it for you, set it for yourself. What goals do you want to achieve this time next year? Because setting SMART goals will provide you direction and motivation. What's your 1-year plan? Do you have a 1-year plan? Where do you want to be 1 year from now? Where do you want to be 5 years from now? And if you don't have one, try and find a coach or a mentor. There are many different types. You can get one from your company if your company does that, or else you can get one from other places. But having somebody to kind of input into you, help you set smart and clear goals is very key. Now, I've talked about networks. So for you to really go up the career ladder, you have to have a network, because your network is your net worth, right? Your network is like gold dust. And I say to people that it's good for you to have a network, but you need to work your network. What do I mean by that? So there's a wheel on the right-hand side. Number one, understand your network. Who's in your network? Because a lot of us, a lot of people think about their network and they think of Facebook. I always say Facebook is the place for your friends. Twitter is the place for you to comment on stuff. But LinkedIn is the place where you actually network with people. And so understand your network. Who is in your network? Are there people in your network that can get you opportunities? Are there people in your network that you can help? So understand your network, understand it. And if it's not as strong as it needs to be, then build it. Next, once you understand your network, then you need to connect to your network. You need to make sure that you're connecting to people, maybe on a monthly or however it's important for you. Like I've given you some stories already where it was my network that got me jobs. It was my peers that helped me know what to do next in my career. And so connecting to your network and leveraging your network or learning from your network is the third point. And then 4 is give to your network. A lot of people say to you on LinkedIn, oh, I want to connect to you, but they don't give you anything. They don't share anything. They don't like your articles. They don't like your comments. And, it's very interesting that actually a pastor found me through LinkedIn. Like, it's leveraging the network. We had Pastor Wale in his network. Pastor Wale had me in his network. And, what they say, you're always 3 degrees away from somebody that you need to connect with. And then finally, connect others to your network. Allow your network to be useful to other people. Let me keep an eye on time. I think I've got another 10 minutes. So let me speed this up. We're almost there. The Bible says in the book of 1 Chronicles 12:32, of the tribe of Issachar, men who understood the times with knowledge of what Israel should do. 200 chiefs and all their relatives were at their command. So these are people that understood, like they could be in the UK and they could say, okay, now that Rishi is taking over, what is happening? What is actually happening in the marketplace? What is happening in the country? These are men who understood the time and they took their time to understand it. And so you understanding the time and season that you are in, where are you on your career journey? Are you at the start of your career journey? Have you just graduated and this is your first job? Because that would determine what you need to do to get up the ladder. Or are you at the middle? Are you like in the middle, you have like 10 years experience, 15 years experience, your journey will be a little bit different. So understanding the time and the season that you're in is very important. Have you just relocated? You know, people are moving around a lot. People are just coming from Nigeria. They're coming into the UK for the first time, and they're learning that actually working in the UK is very different from working in Nigeria. Like even studying in the UK is very different from studying in Nigeria, and just understanding cultural context is very, very key. Or maybe this is your last rodeo. Maybe you're in your 50s like me, and this is like your last job. So what do you want to get out of it? Are you thinking long-term now, legacy, impacts, value creation? Or is this the time for you to look at being self-employed? Or is this a time for you to enhance your side hustle to become your main hustle? Or is this a time for you to pivot in your career journey? Like for me, if you look at my career story, and that's why I would like to tell it, you can see there were many different pivots. I was originally a security guard, if you like, well, civil engineer in Nigeria, then security guard, then I pivoted to administration, pivoted to programming, pivoted then to business analysis, project management, portfolio management, and now I run a business where I'm doing more consulting, right? So understanding your time and seasons does impact your journey in your how you go up the career ladder. And this is one thing that we, and I'm gonna generalize. Well, maybe people of color, don't let me say Nigerians, because there might be people from different parts of Africa on this call, or different people on this call that are not from Nigeria. But we sometimes don't understand this, that in the UK, one of the things you need to do is you need to work on your visibility and advocacy. Make your achievements and aspirations known to your supervisors in your leadership team. I'm not talking about bragging. I'm not talking about waving a flag, look at what I've done, but more around making sure that you can tell your story. The power of your story is very, very, if you don't tell your own story, no one's going to tell it for you. Unless somebody tells you, I'll tell your story on your behalf because now I'm going to be your sponsor. But if you don't have that, you need to find a way to share your achievements and your aspirations. You also need to find a way of doing high visibility stuff. Like if you want to be promoted in most organizations that I've worked in, so let me keep it to the word. The fact that you do your job is not enough. You need to do other things. You know, I remember once when we were in a promotion conversation with somebody, and there were like two people who had done exactly the same kind of work. They'd done exactly the same type of work. And the only reason why one got promoted over the other, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's the best thing, but this was the truth of the matter, was that somebody in the room said, oh, when we went to the pub the other day, this guy he bought around for people. That means he likes people, he'll be a good team leader, so I think we should promote him, as opposed to the other guy. Which, you know, you can say, oh my gosh, that's so unfair. But it's more about understanding how it works. This is how the system works. And so you have to understand it to be able to work with it. And if you don't understand it, seek advocates within the organization to help you with your career development. So I like to talk about top achievers, because at the end of the day, if you're going to go up your career ladder, you need to be an achiever. But I like to push people to say you need to be a top achiever. Even if it's a top achiever for yourself, that you're doing the best that you can do. But I think top achiever also depends on your own definition. There's a definition that your company would have of a top achiever. There's a definition that you might have of a top achiever. But that definition comes from your work ethic and your theology of work. Is this a job that I'm just doing until my next big thing? Or is this a job that just pays my bills, so I don't really care? Or is this a career that I want to develop? All those things will affect how you perform. And then to kind of help you understand what a top achiever is, you definitely need a coach or a mentor. Find them. They're available. I know that I can even predict it already, that one of the questions people are going to ask me today is that how do I find a coach? So I'm already knowing that that's the question that's going to come. And then finally, it's your level of intentionality. How intentional are you about your career? Because a lot of us think that, oh, I will just get promoted when the time is right. No, not in this country. It doesn't work like that. Sometimes you have to be intentional about what you want. I've sacked my manager before. Because like, dude, we are not aligned on what we're trying to get here. You don't see that I'm ready for promotion, so I don't like you to be my manager anymore. I'll have another manager. And literally I changed my managers, and 9 months later I was promoted. because I just understood that this guy doesn't have my best interest at heart. Anyway, so investing in yourself is very key. Investing in your education, your skills development, reading books, pursuing a certification, attending workshops, going to conferences, growing your capacity to learn. These are all things that help you on your career journey and help you to climb the ladder. And I would say that they definitely help me. All right. And so read books, right? There's a book called Winning, like I'm showing you on the screen now, by Tim Grove. It's one of the best books I've read in a long time. And actually what I do is every year I read the book. I read this book every single year because it stretches me. There's another book I'm recommending here by Ram Chandra about high potential leaders. If you think you're a high potential person or you are leading a team of high potential people, it's a great book to read. If you kind of want to know how to be a smart person or work with smart people, this is a great book to read, How to Lead Smart People. And if you feel alone in your career, Betting on a Darkie. This is the story of this Black man in South Africa and how he grew to be head of MTN, head of Microsoft. Amazing, amazing story. And he's still doing amazing stuff, even in his late 50s. So these are kind of books that really stretch your mind and help you think about what are the possibilities. Feedback, feedback is a powerful tool. I know a lot of us don't like feedback because sometimes it feels like it's criticism. But actually, if you want to grow in your career, you need to get comfortable at getting feedback. You need to get comfortable embracing and understanding feedback because it would help your career strategy. It would help your career goals. It will help you to climb the ladder. The only way to grow is to embrace feedback as a gift, for it holds the keys to unlocking your true potential. And yes, there is good feedback and there's bad feedback, but for me, feedback is feedback. And the key for you is what Ken Blanchard said. Feedback is the breakfast of champions. If you want to be a champion, you need to take feedback, leverage it, transform what needs to be transformed, and become a better person. 3 things to consider as I bring this to a close. I think I'm doing almost okay for time. As you go on your career journey, you have to think about these 3 things. What impact are you having? What legacy do you want to leave behind? And what value are you creating or adding? Because if you can answer these questions, they help you position yourself for your next growth burst. In the workplace, in your business, in your career, in your studies, think about it. What impact am I leaving behind? What value am I adding? And what legacy am I leaving behind? To really, really push through, particularly in the climate that we're in, you need a level of resilience. There will be setbacks. I was working as a security guard in Manchester. I got a tap on the shoulder and said, dude, the manager doesn't want you here because of the color of your skin. Please leave, right? That's a setback. But resilience is that power that helps you to not fall apart when things go bad. Resilience is the one that helps you when you go for a promotion and you don't get it. It gives you ways to cope with stress and challenge. It's resilience that helps you when you get fired on the spot, which happened to me once when I was on a project site. Like, dude, you're the weakest link. Leave our offices now. But God turned it around and they brought me back 2 days later. But it's because I had resilience. I didn't throw my toys out of the pram. I maintained a positive outlook. I was talking about this book, Winning by Tim Grove, and he said something in this book that really changed me. The fear shows up on its own. We know that from scripture. The Bible says that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love and of power and of a sound mind. But actually in the marketplace, fear just shows up on its own. Doubt has to be invited. Sometimes when you're doing a project and you're afraid that you might fail, it's very different from having doubts. You see, he said that fear heightens your awareness. Fear that I might not get promoted heightens your awareness and helps you kind of think about what can I do better. It's like adrenaline. It kind of helps you to think, what can I do so I don't fail? and it makes you alert. Whereas doubt is the opposite. Doubt shows up and it slows you down. Doubt says to you, no, they're not going to like your work. Doubt tells you that your degree is not valuable here. You know, doubt says to you, you have a third class, you're never going to get a job. Like I had a third class. But when I went for my interview, they didn't ask me what class was your certificate. And I don't think anybody's asked me in the last 25 years, what did I get in my degree? Right? So doubt can set in and slow you down and paralyze your thinking, but you need to go above that. Moving up the career ladder often requires you to adapt new skills, learn something new, do a new job function. Even sometimes you might have to move industry. If that's your intention to move up the career ladder, and you need to kind of embrace that as a journey. So remember, as I bring this to a close, moving up the career ladder, moving up the ladder in your career can be challenging, can be a challenging experience. But the reality is that if you, with the will of God, the purposes of God, your understanding your vision, your understanding your purpose, a bit of patience, grit, resilience, courage, you'll get there by the grace of God. So Pastor talked about these books that I've written. Pastor talked about these books that I've written. I'll put it in the chat also, but I'm also going to make these slides available, but I'll put the link in the chat also when we get to questions. And, you know, people always ask me, what's the best way to connect with you? LinkedIn is the best way, particularly if you want to talk about career. And I think that's it. So I think I did it in maybe a couple of minutes over, but Pastor, over to you for questions. I'll stop sharing.
Right. Thank you very much, Shola. That was awesome. Wow. It couldn't have been better. Yeah. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. So we're going to go into the question time now. And remember, all you need to do, use your hand raising icon, or you type your questions into the chat box, and then we'll pick it up. So let's set the ball rolling. Let's see people who have questions. And in the meantime, while we expecting people to ask a question, maybe I can start up one or two questions. Good enough that one of the things I was going to ask you because in your intro you talked about networking, but the presentation did quite explain that further. But my question is, you know, in organizations like the NHS, for example, if you are in the supporting part of the organization, they expect you to be able to know your job in a minimum of 2 years. You need to know it, and then you can, they do banding, so you can now say, okay, I want to go to the next band because I've known this one, then I can go further. How, you have said that, we should set goals. Okay, where do we want to be in 1 year, 5 years, and so on? How long should you stay in a post for you to move on?
Wow, that's a very big question, sir. Look, I think there's a combination of things. So let me kind of answer that question with my HR hat on, but also with my career coaching hat on. I think, first of all, you need to understand what you want. Yeah. So I'm sure that there are many people on this call that you can say, they said to you when you joined the company, like I said, they told me it's 5 years before you get promoted. And I just said that, no, I'm not accepting that. It's like, I'm not accepting that because I just thought that was too long. So I guess that personal, passion for something different, right? Means that it sets you on a pathway to say, actually, I definitely want something different. And so therefore, I'm going to find a way to do it. And the reality is that where there is a will, there is a way. Even when there's banding, when there's like there's always exceptions. Like I worked in HR for about 20 years. There's always an exception. If you can prove yourself to be an exceptional candidate, if you can prove yourself to be an exceptional person, guess what? They will make an exception for you. So yes, there is. So the banding is always like a guide. Like, okay, you have to be in this role for 2 years. You have to be in that role for 2 years. But the reality is that you see people that have been there for 5 years. You see people that are there for 18 months. You see, I mean, there was one, like I was working in consulting, which is very similar. Like, you know, like if you're a manager, you have to be a manager for 3 years. And then if you're lucky, you become senior manager for 5 years. If you're lucky, then you become director for 5 years or 7 years, then become partner. But the reality is that when you look around, you see people who do different things. Like my manager that I sacked, he was a senior manager for 10 years. To the extent that he was my manager, he was my senior manager, I was a manager, I got promoted and we became peers. And within 5 years, so from the moment I sacked him to the point, 5 years from that point, I became his manager. He never moved. So I think there's an element of what is the process? What do you want? And what do you need to get you to where you want to get to? So I know I'm not answering your question specifically that how long do you need to be in a role? I think when they give you a band or a process, it's a guide. But if you can show exceptional service, guess what? It's your people around you that will be looking for opportunities to promote you. And I'll give you one story and then we'll get to another question. So when I was at GSK, my boss came to me one day and said, I'm leaving the company and I'm working on a private project, but I've told my boss, who was a VP, that you're the best person to do this job. You're the best person. But actually, for you to do this job, we have to promote you twice in one go, right? So they broke all the rules, right? Because it was like, you're the best person to do this job. We have to go and get HR to approve, but we're going to promote you twice so that we can get you to the level we need you to be at for you to deliver on this job. You understand? And then they said to me, you have to move to America. And I said, I'm not moving to America. My family don't want to move to America, so I'm not moving to America. And they said, okay, what we'll do is that you have to go to America for 2 weeks and you come onshore, like it was like onshore, offshore. But what I'm trying to say is that if you know what you want and you have the right people speaking for you, these guidelines can be accelerated, can be jumped, can be skipped. And if you look around you, permit me to say, our Caucasian brothers, they don't always follow protocol. They know somebody who knows somebody who helps them, who, you know, they went to school together. So even before the guy is ready for promotion, they're like, Mr. Ade, we went to IFE together. Come on, like I know the value you had. You're a great dentist. Come on, let's find a way that we can make this thing happen for you. So I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. Yeah, I know it's a difficult one. It's just that oftentimes you find people who are stuck, you know, in one place, and yeah, but it's an individual issue. Okay, so I have a question in the chat box, and it says, you talked about academy. What is it about? And
Yeah.
if it's on programming, can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, so my academy is not on programming. My academy is actually a coaching, mentoring, leadership academy. But if you're interested in programming, you can message me and then I will, there are a few people that are in my network that do courses on, you know, programming, business analysis, project management. So if you're interested in that, let me know and then I can point you in the right direction to the right people. Okay, looks like there's another question.
Right. Okay, one new message. Okay, how do you overcome imposter syndrome?
No, there's one before that. Sorry, there's one before that.
Oh, one before that. Okay.
So I'll take it. It's from Omo Bimo. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. How did you contextualize your job title as a security while applying for the administrative jobs? So what I did was actually at that time, because I guess depending on how far your career is, I just said I was working as a security guard. I didn't have to hide it. That's what I was doing. I applied for the job. But remember, it was a graduate placement. So what qualified me for the job wasn't the job I was doing then. It was the fact that I was a graduate. And so I followed the process, and I got taken in. And I know it's not always the case, and I know that question is coming from, what do you put on your CV? What, like, sometimes, particularly in this country, they want to know that you have at least worked, right? So sometimes putting that you worked in a cafe is good enough because it shows that you came from Nigeria or wherever you came from, and you've come to the UK and you have worked, so you kind of understand the tax system, how it all works. So I think it depends on the job you're going for and what they're looking for. So sometimes you need to leave it on, and sometimes you need to leave it off. There's a hand raised, but before the hand raised, I'll take the next question, which is, how do you overcome imposter syndrome on the career ladder? Okay, I'm not going to take a shortcut, but I will take a shortcut, then I'll give you the long answer. The shortcut is the grace of God. But to answer your question, I think the first thing you need to do, and that's why I spent some time talking about it, is you need to understand yourself. What makes you you? Because that's what's going to be challenged by the imposter syndrome. Like I told you, when I went to become a programmer, I wasn't the best programmer, but I was willing to work hard to become the best programmer. And so when you see imposter syndrome, fear or doubt, what you need to do then is to, the Bible says, David said, I encourage myself in the Lord. He encouraged himself in it, like, I've not come this far, like, to just fail. So I've not come this far to get fired. I've not come this far. It's not, I tell my story and it's very nice and it looks like, hey, wow, you had but there were ups and downs. There were times when I go for interviews and I don't get the job, right? But the key thing is to understand who you are and what you're trying to do. That's the power. And that's how you overcome imposter syndrome. Okay? So, Pastor, I'll let you choose. There's 3 hands raised.
Yeah.
Questions.
Okay. Isosa, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you very much, sir. My question is, what are chances that you don't miss an essential path of career growth and development in your career wrong by crisscrossing and getting to where you should be earlier than expected? For example, you quit a job, you apply for the next, you go for a higher role, you get it. There are chances you may miss very essential and vital part of your career growth and development. So could you shed more light on that, please? Thank you.
Yeah, happy to shed more light on that. But I think, again, you need to start from who are you and what are you trying to achieve? And the reason why I say that is that a lot of us we're in this situation where maybe we're not being promoted or we're not getting the right thing, or we want to move because there's more money. But I always say to people that, particularly for Christians, like, really ask God, what does God want for you? Because sometimes you want to move and God is like, wait, there are vital lessons, like you said, that you need to learn in here. But to really get to that, you need to do something that I encourage people to do, which is understand that you're not employed by NHS, GSK, College of Law, NASPERS. You're employed by God, right? God is your boss, right? And yes, you go into work and you have somebody that's bossing you around, but they're not your boss. Ultimately, you work for God. The Bible says it. The Bible says that whatsoever your hand finds to do, do it as unto the Lord. So I think the starting point is to make sure that as you're discovering yourself, you also discover what is the purpose of God for your life. Because when you understand that, it does help you to make decisions concerning your career. Let me give you an example. And I can give you, like, if we had till tomorrow, I can give you an example, like, from my life, so many examples, but I want to just give you this particular one. So when I became a director, I had no other plans. I had no plan B. Plan A was I become a director, then I become a partner in PwC. I had no plan B. It was like director, partnership, no other plan. There was no other plan. That was just my plan. And then my plan was truncated when my boss said to me, you will never become a partner because you're never going to fit in. So I'm like, okay, this is let me be Yoruba for 1 second. This is wahala, right? But I went to God with it. And I said, God, like, I have no plan B. And then God said, but you want to become a partner, but was that my plan for you? I was like, but God, you know, if I become a partner, this is how much money I'm going to get, you know, in my personal career goals. And God was like, you know, I can get you that same amount of money outside this company. And I was like, how? I didn't imagine that I could get what I was looking for outside the organization. And then I step out and God provided. So I think I've given you a long answer to your question, which is really, who are you? What is the context that God is calling you into? And make sure you have mentors and coaches around you to kind of guide you through your journey. Did that answer your question? So.
No, thank you, sir.
All right.
All right. Thank you for that answer. Aki, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, good evening, sir, and good evening, Pastor Shola, for the word. One aspect of the teaching that I really like is the fact that you talked about books, like reading books. I think that aspect cannot be overemphasized. One thing I found out is so many people today, or most of us from Africa, we don't read. Now most people spend time with their phones other than like looking for books to read. So I like the fact that you have encouraged us to try to read books, because there's so many things that you learn when you read books. And so having said that, yeah, so I was thinking, because I was trying to look for a way to frame this my question just into one question, because it's kind of scattered everywhere. But you know, people come into this country, for instance. We know this wave of nurses moving into the country. Most of them are women, and their husband following them, like, to the UK. Most of these people I have. Let me use my friend as an example. Like, he's a lecturer in Nigeria. He was a senior lecturer. The wife is a medical doctor, relocated to the UK with the kids. I know there was this struggle about, you have to come to the UK because I can't just take care of the kids myself and everything. So my friend had to resign. He resigned in Nigeria and came to the UK, and he's been here for like 3 years without, like, no. So he works like as a porter now. And you know, everybody was blaming him. How do you have to leave your job and everything? So he has been struggling to get an academic role since he came here. And I remember when you were talking, you mentioned the fact that maybe your family was in Manchester and you were in Guildford. So now, trying to raise a family in this kind of environment, sometimes you don't have that luxury of leaving your wife with the kids, because maybe at work, both of you needs to be present. So in a nutshell, what would you say to people who are struggling? Like, because you need to raise your family, you need to consider your career, you need to consider your family. And some people had to like leave some jobs, or they couldn't go for some roles because they couldn't move because of their family. So what advice would you give to, or what would you say to people who have found themselves in this kind of situation?
Pastor Ade, your people ask big questions.
Yeah,
But it's a good question.
they are postdoctorals.
It's a good question. Like, one thing I didn't say, but I think I should say it, that actually I came to the UK because my fiance at the time had moved to the UK. So my wife had moved to the UK and I basically followed her, right? So that's how I got here. So again, if I was in a non-Christian context, I probably answer this a little bit differently, but I want to answer it in the Christian context, and I'll give you the non-Christian context answer. So the Christian context is that, did God say? Right? And I think this is the question that this particular Jackpa generation, 2020, post-COVID Jackpa, I think people are not asking the question, did God say? Yeah. Because if you don't answer that question, it becomes very, very complicated and very, very difficult, right? So when I came to the UK almost 30 years ago, God said. And so for me, I didn't take one day to collect government money, even though I was entitled to it because I was British born. I didn't take government money because I was like, if God cannot bring me all the way from Nigeria and bring me here, and I will now be taking government money, like that's not my portion. Because God said. So I was like, God, I have to work. And so I got a job. And I said I would be happy to do whatever my hand finds to do. So I say that, and I know that what I've said now, people might take it the wrong way. I'm not saying, God cannot, take an opportunity that you have. But I think if God has said to you, this is what's going to happen, that you should come to the UK, then you know that you have to just hold on and God will make it happen. Let me give you an example. And I'm giving you this because I want to kind of add color to the story I told earlier. At one point in my career, my wife believed that God was telling her to go to Nigeria and set up a business. And so actually she went to Nigeria, lived in Nigeria for 3 years. So reverse jackpot if you like. And actually what she does today is she runs a music school in Nigeria, but she lives in the UK, right? So because God said, right, that's the point. Like, so when we tell people that she runs a music business in Nigeria, they're like, how? Nigeria, they will steal your money, they will do this, they will do that. But it's because God said. And so because God said, she's been running a music business from the UK for the last 10 years remotely, even before COVID, right? And that's the key point. It's like, we have to be disciplined enough to hear the voice of God. And like, even my pastor in my church said to me, Shola, are you and your wife going through a separation? Why is your wife in Nigeria and you are here? What is going on? I said, well, God said to her, right? So I say that to kind of say, and I'm like I said, I'll give you the Christian answer. That's the Christian answer. The non-Christian answer, like if I was in a professional setting, I would say you need to understand the time and season that you're in. Understand the system that you're going into. A lot of people jump into a system without understanding it. They come into the UK without understanding how the system works. They tell you that they're going to pay you 55,000. You think it's big money until they take your tax, your N9. Before you know it, 55,000 is not a lot of money, right? And so taking time to understand where you're going to is very, very important. So I used to live in the UK and I went to Germany to live in Germany for 5 years, right? I was relocated by my company. But I had to understand, how does this system work? How do you save money in this system? How do you invest in this system? How do you buy a property in this system? So understanding systems is very, very, very important. And sometimes when you are forced to relocate because maybe your partner relocated, or an opportunity came, or you applied for it and then you quickly have to move, you have to understand the systems and understand how do you break into what you really want to get into. Particularly, like, if you know that God is the one that brought you there, then if you're a lecturer in Nigeria, then you will find a way. Whether you're starting in a college, and the problem is, I'm sorry, I'm going to overspeak in a second on this particular thing, but the problem is that we just want to almost lift up and translocate into a different country and everything should just work. And that would only happen if you were relocated by a company. Like when I moved to Germany, my company relocated me, right? And so they gave me a cushion. Like they found my flat for me. They flew my family over to come and get to know how Germany works. They gave me pocket money for the first couple of, if your company moves you, it's a very different story to you moving yourself. But the due diligence that a company does before they relocate somebody is the same level of due diligence you need to do for yourself, for your family, when you're being relocated. How do schools work? So part of what they did for me when I moved from the UK to Germany was that they gave me a person to go and look for schools, gave me a budget to go and visit schools, paid for my taxis to go and, you understand? So that's just an unbelieving person relocating me for work. They have to do all that due diligence. How much more you, who God has called, there's a level of due diligence that's required. And I think sometimes we are a bit lazy to do the hard work, and then we put our arms and say, this system doesn't work. Black people cannot do this, Black people cannot do that. But you haven't studied the system. If you study it, then you can see how it works. And it takes time to study it. Sorry, that's a long answer to your question, but it was a very deep question.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Shola, for that answer. Yeah, just to add to it, there's a bit of mentorship, and that provides the information that you need to break into systems. So people have gone ahead of you. You comfort others with the comfort wherewith you have been comforted. That's what scripture says. So you mentioned that earlier on, just chipping it in. Okay, so I've seen a hand up. I'll come to you, but there's some questions in the chat box. This one says, while pivoting into a new field or level of employment, what are the key success factors? And then the B part says, as people of color, how do we create impact at work and influence at strategic levels?
So I'm going to take the second question first, because I like the second question more than the first question. Not that I don't have an answer for the first one, but I like the second question because it reflects that, Catherine, you're thinking on a bigger level, right? So people of color, I think 2024 is way better than 1997, 1998, way better than when we first arrived, for those who have been here for a long time. And actually, because of diversity and inclusion, we're almost encouraged to add value. But, I'm a HR person, I can tell you that some of that is also smoke and mirrors, right? But to really create impact at work and influence at strategic levels, you need to understand the room. Can you read the room? Do you understand? Like, a lot of people don't understand that at some levels in some organizations, they don't even have to use words. They just look at each other, and that's an approval for that deal to go ahead, or it's not. They have not used words. We talk about networking on the golf course, going that we are working in, and influence it. And I think you said it already, and I don't think we can say the word more. Mentorship and coaching. Like, I was mentored and coached by people of Caucasian, because there's nobody, like, every time as I've gone up, there are rooms I've been in where, like, when I was at Process, I was in the top 100. I was the only Black man in the top 100 for the company. So you can't, I'm not looking for the guy that looks like me. I have to be influenced by people who are not like me, understand their ways, understand their mannerisms, understand what makes them tick. So that's the second question. The first question is, like, what are the key success factors? I think some of that comes from you, that if you're pivoting your career, what are you trying to do? Because pivoting requires learning. Are you willing to learn what it takes to be good at that? Like, when I became a programmer, like I said, I probably did 5 hours, 6 hours a day to be a better programmer, because I knew I was not good enough. But I got so good that I could leave and go and get it. So when I went for my interview at GSK, in the same room was my supervisor and myself. We were both applying for the same job. And I got it, right? So remember, I was the weakest, but then I became one of the strongest because I was willing to put the effort in. So my key success factor is that I need to be as good as the people in the room. I wasn't even trying to be better. I just wanted to be as good as, right? And then I was blessed to be better in some things, not in everything, but in some things that made me stand out, that made me go and face off with my supervisor, and I get the job. So those are those two questions. Hopefully they've answered them, Catherine. Are they? Just drop us a message in the chat. Yeah.
Just before that, Femi, can you ask your question?
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Thank you for this section. When you were answering Pastor, you talked about make ourselves being exceptional in our places of work.
Yeah.
And I'm asking this question based on people that work in the healthcare system. How do you make yourself as being exceptional, especially when you work where There are certain guidelines and protocols of how you should work. There are standard operating procedures on how you should do things. There are step 1, step 2, step 3. Working is almost like a routine. Like, this is how you should do it. This is how you should work. There's nothing like, oh, we have a new project that we should work on. Then you make yourself exceptional in that project. Like, how can you make yourself exceptional and extraordinary in like place of work like that? Thank you.
So yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question, and again, I'm glad I'm in a Christian program because I can cheat. So my cheat for this is that with God, all things are possible, right? But to answer your question specifically, like, it doesn't really matter what you're doing, even if it is rote and mundane. Like, I was working in security, but I still got promotions in security because what I did was I understood the process and then I helped improve the processes, right? So the question is, are you in a place that you are so trapped in the mundane that you can't think outside the box? I'm trying to think of a book that I wanted to recommend. It's by a guy called Rodriguez, right? This guy was the janitor. He was the janitor in the company. And you know what happened, right? Think about it, janitor. He ended up becoming the VP of products. The product they were making was crisp. And have you ever seen Flaming Hot? You know, like I feel like it's like a Cheetos, right? And let me just quickly give me 1 second. Sorry, let me just Google it. Flaming Hots. Flaming Hots. Oh, forgotten. Yeah. Yes. So the book is called Flaming Hot. And it's the story of a janitor who basically created a product line that in the end, he became a vice president in Pepsi, right? Now, that is an impossible story, right? Impossible story, but it's true. It's a true story. You can buy the book and you can read it. So if you've read something like that, I think it gives you a understanding that all things are possible to him that believes, right? It's not the easy. I put the link in the book. I put it in the wrong place. Sorry. Give me 1 second, everyone. Okay. There you go. So that's the book. You can find it on Amazon.co.uk, but it's an incredible story of this man who was a janitor. He was a toilet cleaner, but then ended up producing one of the, I mean, that product eventually, I think, for Pepsi makes 100 million a year or something like that. Like, it's an incredible story. And I use those kind of stories to tell myself that it doesn't really matter how complicated or how strict and routine something is. Where there's a will, there will be a way. Even if it means like, so the first thing I would say is, see a man diligent in his work. He will stand before kings and not mere men, right? So the first thing is that you have to be diligent. You have to know how to do your job well, like do it well. Because if you can do it well, then you can do extra. All I'm saying is that, and I am not a doctor, but I do know a lot of people that have worked in the medical field, and I've been on journeys with both who wanted to become consultants but end up being GPs because it was just too complicated and difficult, etc. And all I'm saying is that I've seen enough people in the medical field do this exceptional thing, because what they do is they first of all learn the principles, like you don't miss a beat, and then you can show extra value. So you can't show extra value if you're not even doing what you're asked to do. So you can't go above and beyond if you're not doing what you're asked to do. So I think the starting point just for me is do what you are supposed to do well, because the reality is that there are people around you, and look around you, take the time to look around you, ask questions. You realize that, yes, we're all doing the same road job, but somehow James, Anna, they did the same job, but now they're the team leader. They did the same job, now they're the supervisor. They did the same job, now they're the manager. How many stories have you heard of oh, they used to work in this department. How did they get out? How? Well, that's the key of finding sponsors, finding coaches, finding mentors. They will show you the way. That's what a mentor does. Mentor shows you the way, right? If you want to find a mentor, find somebody that is doing what you want to do, then they will show you the shortcuts, right? They'll show you the shortcuts. You don't have to all go around the same way. It doesn't have to take you 5 years to get to this place. You know, my mentor at GSK said to me, it doesn't have to take you 5 years to get promoted. Don't mind Dominic. I'll show you the way. And they showed me. Be quick, they showed me. Right? So I hope that answers your question, right? And don't get me wrong, I know there are some things that are protocol. There are some things that are, like, even if you're a teacher, there are certain things you have to do in a particular order. But somehow, out of those teachers, one of them will become head teacher. One of them will become deputy head teacher. One of them will become head of department. There is a system. You need to understand the system, work the system, and let the system work for you. Okay. Pastor, I think you're on mute.
All right. I was saying thank you for that answer. And if I chip in anything to you, just Femi, leverage is very important. You know, just like Shala has been saying, you have to be doing something over and above every other person. Dr. Miles would say, find a problem that you solve. Find a problem that you solve in that place that no one else, has the solution to it. You find yourself just flying.
Yeah. Let me tell you a quick story.
Yeah.
A quick story. And then there's a question in the chat. And I think maybe that will be like our last one. I don't know.
Okay.
Are there any other hands raised? There's a question in the chat, but let me tell you a quick story, right? When I was working for Royal Bank of Scotland, I was a manager, and there were certain things that you had to do. Like, I can tell you so many stories about it, but there's certain things they had to do. It was a project that somebody else had won, and I just had to follow certain rules. But then I discovered that there was something that the company wanted to do. They've been trying to do it for a long time, and nobody had been able to crack it. You need to speak to the chief people officer of the Royal Bank of Scotland, right? And nobody had ever done it. They've been trying for like 9 months. Nobody had been able to do it. And one day I was walking by the woman's office. Her secretary was not on seat. Her door was open. I just walked in. I said, hello, ma. I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Sharash Noike. I work for PwC. I'm helping you on this project. Said, yeah. So what? I can't even remember. She then asked me a question. I answered the question. We had a back and forth. And then she said, out of the blue, I wasn't expecting it. I didn't even go into that room because of that. She said, how can I help you? I said, well, how you can help me is that if you can, let it come from your office that we're here to help you do this data project. Please, can you just get buy-in from everybody? So before I knew it, the woman decided that based on my conversation with her, that she was going to put me in the global newsletter. I still have the press cuttings today. I'm not an employee of Royal Bank of Scotland. I'm a consultant, a junior one for that matter. But she put me on page 2 of the global newsletter and said, this is Shola Oshunoike. He's here to help us. Give him any support that he requires to get the job done. So me, I didn't think anything about it. My boss on the project saw the newsletter, asked me, did I speak to this woman? I said, yeah, I spoke to her. Well, he said, when? I said, 2 weeks ago. Before I knew it, because we were in Edinburgh, before I knew it, the next day, the senior partner, the Oga at the top, he flew in for no other reason to just come and see me and tell me that we know you are new to this company, but you are going to be promoted. Full stop. Like, it wasn't like, do you want to be promoted? Here's the policy. He just said, you, for what you did, you are going to be promoted. And he said, you know, I flew up just to tell you that. Then he said, sit me down. How did you do it? How did you do it? I explained to him, I just walked in. Yeah, I like talking to people. So when the door was open, I talked to the person. You know what's important is that conversation led to 1.25 million worth of business. I was a junior programmer. In fact, you should not even be, I was a junior manager, sorry. You are not even supposed to be in the room when those kind of deals were being done. You're too junior to be in the room. But God opened that door. I used what I had. It's, you know, and that's what resulted. And from that moment on, the team of partners were like, Shola, whatever you need to do to get you to the next level, we are behind you. We are going to be your sponsors. You know, and they did. You know, quickly I became senior manager. I was given autonomy, things that other managers did not have. I was given very quickly, rapid growth, because I did something that no one else was doing, and it was within my comfort zone. You understand? I wasn't going out of my comfort zone. I was in my comfort zone. So understand, that's like understanding yourself, understanding the value you bring. So important. You know, my wife used to joke that even if I was a cashier at a Tesco, I would travel. They would just say, okay, now we go and teach them what you're teaching them in this cashier point, go and teach them in the branch over there. Because that's kind of my nature, right? And I can testify to that all through my career. So I'm just saying that sometimes you need to have a deep conviction of who you are. That's why understanding who you are is very, very important. And that's what opens doors for you. All right, the question in the chat is by Adetola. Oh, it was directly to me. Oh, sorry, can we sign up? Oh, the Adetola was asking, can we sign up for mentorship and career coaching? That's possible, but sorry for another day. So maybe Adetola can reach out to me directly. Sorry, I just saw it as a direct question to me, so you wouldn't see it, Pastor. All right, I think that's it, right?
Yeah. You reminded me of something, you know, one of those cliches that we have in the NHS. Make every moment count.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's another thing that you guys need to look out for. Make every opportunity, the opportunities there, but make it count when, you know, it stares at your face. Yeah. Right. Is there any question from anybody else before we draw the curtains on the program?
Yes, sir. Good evening,
Oh,
sir.
okay, go ahead.
Yes, sir. My name is Adekbemi, and my question is about the first, like we all say that first impression matters a lot.
Yeah.
And so maybe for someone that's just starting a career or getting a job, how do you, quote and unquote, attack the company when you get there? What are you bringing to the table? Like, what should be your long-term goal? What should be your objective? Even though that's personal, but you need to like build it around the company a little bit. Especially as a person of color, like what should be the major thing that should be at the back of your mind when starting a job or a career in this part of the world?
So I think I mentioned it already, but I'll say it again. And I haven't tested this theory with entry level, but my theory definitely works from, 3 years, 5 years experience. I think what I would say is you need to understand the company, right? You need to understand the company that you're working for. And probably the fastest way to do that is to read the annual report of the company. Understand what is this company that I have joined. I mean, people say you should do that before your interview, but most of the time we're interviewing 10 jobs. So it's the first one. I read something, but you haven't read it deeply, right? And I learned this because when I joined, I knew it, but when I joined NASPERS, my boss said, here's my first gift to you. Go and read the annual report. And by the time I read it, I understood some things. But then I realized that actually 2 years later, I had to read it all over again. In fact, annually, it became my thing because then I understood the company. right? And I have this saying, and I know that everybody doesn't agree with me, but I keep saying it. You have to love the company you're working for if you're going to have an impact on it. If you don't love the company you're working for, then look for another company to work for. Or just accept that there's no point, because if you want career growth, you need to understand the company you're working for. You need to understand how they tick. You need to understand what journey are they on. And you need to have a passion around the company. Because I think the moment you understand the company culture, understand what makes the company tick, and you love the company. When I say love, I mean you love what they're doing. Like if you work for a pharmaceutical, if you work for the NHS, do you love what your regional NHS is doing? Do you like what that particular, like even the politics that they do, whether it's a, a conservative community or a labor or independent, like do you really align with that organization? Because if you don't, it's probably better for you to look for another job, because you will not be able to go very far. Because the more you push up, the more you're going to be challenged with, do you want to be part of this company? Now, to your question, simply, what do you need to do? I think the first thing you need to do, and I say this to a lot of Nigerians, the first thing you have to do is forget your color. And I know when I say that, people are like, what do you mean? I say, forget your color. Because sometimes we automatically go into a situation thinking that, oh, because I'm Black, right? Because I'm Black. And so already you're putting some barriers up that you don't even realize. It's subconscious. I would say, just do a good job. Now, don't get me wrong, there is racism in the business place, whether it's institutional, whatever. I have personal stories. I've lost interviews because of my color. I've been fired from jobs because of my color. So I have all these stories. But I'm telling you that if you go in with the mindset that I am Black, it kind of begins to paralyze you, right? Because it doesn't say Black doctor. It doesn't say Black nurse. It says nurse. It says doctor. It says programmer. So be good at the job and don't, because also I coach a lot of people, and I realize that they go into it as almost inadvertently thinking that they're discriminating against me because I'm Black. But then when you go beyond it, you realize that you haven't understood how systems work. You haven't understood, you don't have mentorship, you don't have leverage, you don't have anything. And of course, you're gonna fall behind. You understand? Like I said, when I came into this country to work as a security guard, I didn't know that there were systems, there were processes. Like as a security guard that the company I was working with, you can't sleep. Every hour you have to go and clock something. If you don't clock it, you don't get paid. So me, I was not getting paid because I was not clocking in. So there's certain places that you have to clock. If you don't clock, they assume that you are sleeping, even though if you are not. So it's just simple things like that. If you understand, that's not because I'm Black, it's because I didn't do what was needed to be done. So I think the first thing you have to do is love the company that you're working for. Make sure that you align with them. And sometimes it's not the first company you work for that you're gonna get that alignment, but hopefully if it's the company that you really like, you're aligned with their vision. Then number 2, forget that you're Black. Then number 3, just do a really good job. Like really, like when I say good job, like when you finish doing your job, and I'm not talking about working long hours, I'm just talking about working smarter, working efficient, asking questions. Somebody asked the question, I think it was Jesse Femi, that, oh, there's protocols. Ask the question, why do we do it like this? Even asking that question makes people think, first of all, they think, this one is coming to change things. This one doesn't agree. No, just say, I'm just curious. I'd like to understand. Asking questions is probably one of the best things you can do. Understand. I always ask my bosses, so why did you come here? Why did you join this company? How long have you been here? Right? When in my book, Managing Up, I talk about if you want to get your manager to be your defender, there's certain things you need to understand their story. Your manager, like my manager that I fired, he didn't want to get promoted. He was very happy. He's a cyclist. He doesn't want wahala. He just wants to be doing his job, enjoying life. Our passions did not align. So that's why I got promoted to his level and I got promoted above him. And even till the time I left the company, he was still on the same level. And until he left the company, he never left that level. So there was no alignment, but that's because I understood him, right? So I think hopefully that answers your question, right? I think we just need to get rid of this, oh, it's because I'm black. No. I mean, don't get me wrong. I will say it 100 million times. There are racists in the workplace. I've experienced it, but you cannot let it define you. And I'll finish with a story. I used to travel a lot to South Africa. I used to go to South Africa every month with one of my companies. And when I was on the flight, I met a guy who works for Facebook. He's from Cameroon. And I said to him, I said, look, when you're in South Africa next time, let's stay in the same hotel. So he was going to get to South Africa a day before me. So he checked into the hotel. And even before I landed, the guy was calling me, I cannot stay here. I said, why? He said, have you seen that everybody that serves is black? All the customers are white. I said, really? I said, I've never noticed that, But after he said it, I didn't realize that that was true. And so I realized that I had gotten to a place in which it had nothing to do with who was in the room. I'm in a hotel. I need to eat, I need to sleep, and I need to go to work. So I was just doing my thing. But after he said it, then I observed, and he told me to go to another hotel, which is literally down the road, and it was the reverse, right? And it taught me a lesson that actually maybe I have done a good job now. And maybe it's because at the level I have gotten to, right? So it also depends on levels that you're at. The level that I'm gotten to, 900% of the time when I walk into the room, I will be the only black person in the room. 900% of the time, right? To the extent that once I was in South Africa, the guy said to me that, oh, the audio visual is not working. Can you fix it? I say, I'm not IT. Let's call IT. She said, you know IT. I said, no, me, I'm here to meet so. That was the person I was meeting. And her face went red, right? It was like, she didn't expect me to be of that ilk or level, right? So I'm just saying that to kind of say, I really want to emphasize this thing that, yes, we are black people from Nigeria, but let's do our job first. And then we worry about color later.
All right, thank you, Shola, for that. There's one other hand that is raised.
And now in overtime.
Yes, yeah, when it's going to be the very last one. And while we're asking that one, yes, let's have some feedback, a hand clap, or whatever you have gained from this meeting. Just put it in the chat box or something. And then, Bright, very quickly, the last question.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. I'll be very brief. So my question is in line with your work and family balance. Looking at your path, it's very incredible, sincerely, I must say. So for me, what I've just been going through my mind is how are you able to manage these transitions and then still maintain a solid family life? How, especially in this part of the world where we find ourselves. So please, if you can share briefly your experience in that regard, so as to help some of us who are aspiring, or all of us who are aspiring this way, but we also want to have that strong family system. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Like I said, you people, you like to ask very complex. That question, Brad, that you asked, that's a whole workshop on its own. But let me try and answer that question, right? So I think, again, I'm so grateful that I'm in a Christian environment because it's easier to answer those kind of questions, right? First of all, you have to marry right. Marry the right partner. And it works in both ways, I had to, in my career, I've also had to take a back seat. I've had to be the one that's taking my son to school, picking him up because my wife had to travel. So I think if you marry the right partner, it's the good step in the right direction. Like if you marry the person that God has ordained for you, or somewhere that at least you understand each other. And for those who were married before they became Christians, it's really about understanding your partner and your partner understanding you, and know that you're on a journey together. That's the first thing. Second thing is, it is very, very complicated in this country to manage all these things. But you have to get rid of all your ideologies from where you're coming from. You know, there are certain things like, I sometimes do a workshop with my wife so that it's not like I'm talking behind her back. There are some things that my wife doesn't do because she doesn't want to do it, but it needs to be done. So I have to do it, right? And I'm saying that because this is what brings balance, right? So if you're a kind of, and I'm not challenging anybody or any cultural preferences, or I'm just saying that you need to learn to blend. You know, when my parents were here, my dad learned how to do my sister's hair. He could plait my sister's hair, right? Because that was what was required. The girl needs to go to school the next day. Mommy has done nights all night. She's not coming back until 6 a.m. and the daughter has to go to school at 7 a.m. So you have to improvise, you know, and I think having that ability to be agile around your family life, and again, understanding yourself. What do you want? I have 3 children, right? And I'm traveling. So, and I'm the one that does the ironing in the house. So when I started traveling, my wife said, you better get an ironing lady because I don't have the time to iron. I can't take care of the kids and do the ironing. So we got an ironing lady. You see what I'm saying? When I was traveling too much, we got a dishwasher, right? So you can use things to plug the gaps, right? And maybe what I haven't said today is that I also do missions. I was also an elder in a church. I preached regularly. There was a time I preached 26 times in 1 year, right? And I'm still, and that was the year that I traveled to the US every 2 weeks. So anytime I came back, my papa was like, you're preaching or you're on duty. So it's balancing all those things requires, so I have got rid of the word work-life balance. I do not like that word. I do not use it. I just talk about being present. So when you're at work, it's not the time for you to be doing Facebook. It's not the time for you to be doing Instagram. It's not the time for you to be playing games. Do your work. When you finish your work, be efficient at work. Now it's home time. Don't take your work home. If you can, like for some people, it's not possible, but if you can. So when you're home with your kids, they know you are with them there. You know, train up your child in the way you go, when you depart. When they grow older, they will not depart from it. Now, it doesn't mean that I have perfect children, but what I do know is that God has helped us, you know. So I have 3 kids. My oldest is 26, my second is 21, and my youngest is 19. And I can say by the grace of God, they have found their path. They have found who they are in God, right? But that takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of, like, I didn't go to every football game, but when my kids, give you an example, when my kids were in Nigeria, that's a story for another day, but when my kids lived in Nigeria, which they did for 3 years, I used to go to Nigeria on Friday and I leave on Monday, right? So just imagine, like I'll go on Friday, I will land, I used to fly with Virgin, I will land, they will pick me up from the airport, we'll take the kids to school. After the kids finish from school, I'll go home, do some emails, then I'll go and pick the kids from school. And then on Monday, before the kids are dropping off, no, we drop the kids at school, then they go and drop me at the airport, right? So I'm just saying that along the way, there are sacrifices you have to make things work. And I think a lot of people come into this country forgetting that there is no house help that you can just call. There is no mommy and daddy, like you are on your own. So if you don't have an understanding between each other and you don't have an alignment in your overall goals and plans, there will be disalignment. So there is, I think somebody wrote in the chat, heavy sacrifices. Yes, because I want to be a good dad. Like my priority, there was one time my priority in my life was my work. Then I realized that, I cannot, because, and I tell a story in one of my events about when we lost our second child. When we lost our second child, then I realized that, okay, you know that guy Dominic that told me that 5 years is long. I went to him and said, oh, I lost my child. He said, oh, just get over it. Can you please deliver this project? Many people lose children. And I walked away and realized that, okay. So these people, they don't care. So if I don't prioritize my family, they're not going to help me prioritize it. So then I decided that no, my family comes first, right? Everything I do has to revolve around my family. And my family comes first. So my family starts with my wife and my children, then of course ministry, right? So you have to learn these things and understand that to get a good tree, it takes a lot of taking care of, watering, checking on it, right? So, like I said, Bright, you asked a very complicated question. I was trying to give you like a variety of stories to show you that it wasn't all plain sailing, There were times that, my kids were like, I don't want to believe in God anymore. How do you navigate that? How do you coach through that? How do you come alongside that? How do you pray through that, right? There's a lot of things that you have to do. So, okay, I wanted to give you that, so I don't want to leave here like, Shala, the rosy life, everything was hunky-dory. No, there were sacrifices that came along the road, but what got me through it, right? And I know it sounds like a cliche, is understanding the will of God for my family, understanding the will of God for my own life, understanding the will of God for my wife's life, so that I'm not just being selfish and say, oh, I'm the breadwinner, so, whatever I need to do has to happen. No, it's how do we keep this whole thing in balance? How is it that actually my wife needs the car to go to work and I have to use the bus to take my son on my chest to nursery? Because that's what made sense. That's what made sense. There was a time in my life when my wife was earning more than me. So who should make the sacrifices? Me. You understand? So I'm just saying that to kind of give you a balanced view. But I think if you put God at the center of everything you do, you will always find a way. Amen.
Thank you very much, Shala. I mean, it wasn't only Manchester University that you gave 101%. You've also given us more than 100% tonight. Thank you. Thank you very much. We really appreciate that. One thing that I've learned here, and thanks to everyone who put in comments, God bless you. And I pray that this will be a lasting impact in your lives in the mighty name of Jesus. One thing that I'm taking away is that you see, you walk to become, not to acquire. Okay, you walk to become. So it talked about know yourself, know where you're going to, what you want. Okay, that is becoming, not just I'm working just to get a salary, I'm working just to pay bills. Walk to become what God wants to make you into. So thank you once again for coming and setting an invite. Next month, by God's grace, we have another Lifeline, and we'll be talking finances. We have a financial consultant who will be coming to talk to us. So come with all your big questions again. All right, so this is where we will be calling it a night for the month of March. We'll just say the grace together as we close. Shall we share the grace together? Now may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us now and forevermore. Amen. Surely God's goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. I'll dwell in the house of the Lord forever and ever. Amen. Amen. So this is the time that you turn on your cameras, and then we say hi to one another, and we say bye-bye.